Hello there, and a warm welcome to this edition of the Citizens Chat Show, streaming on YouTube at Civic Space TV. My name is Judith Atim. Glad you're with us. Today we are discussing a very important issue, and we are asking, actually, what is the price of freedom in Uganda? We're looking at the case of Dr.Kizza Besigye and political prisoners. Joining me to discuss this is our usual panelists. Quite a full house today. Just to show you the importance of this conversation. On my immediate left is Dr. Robert Ojambo, who is the head of the History Department at Kyambogo University. Good afternoon, Dr. Ojambo.
Good afternoon, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Next to Dr. Ojambo is Mr. Joseph Ochieno, political commentator and UPC Ideologue. Good to have you, Joseph.
Pleasure to be here.
Also joining us today is Honourable Salaamu, Musumba, seasoned politician. Good afternoon, Honourable.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you guys. Long time.
And next to Honourable Musumba is Honourable George Odongo, member of the East African Legislative Assembly. Good to have you, Honourable.
Thank you very much.
Last but not least is retired Major Awich Pollar, Director for External Relations at the NRM. Major, good afternoon and good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, and greeting to our viewers.
Well, a lot has been happening.
Today I've not talked about the mighty party.
He's going to.
Oh.
I'm sure he will. He's building to get there. It has been quite a packed season and a very busy week with a lot of political demands, especially to have Dr. Kizza Besigye freed from prison, as well as the scores of political prisoners who are languishing in various prisons across the country, of course, for political reasons. And Besigye has been in and out of court. Not too long ago, the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional to have civilians tried in the military courts. And we understand that Dr. Kizza Besigye has also been on hunger strike for quite an extended period of time. And he's in very, very poor health. He's looking frailer every day he makes a public appearance. And this has actually caused a lot of concern among Ugandans, among politicians, among activists, and generally every citizen about his freedom. And that forms the basis of our conversation today. And I'll start by asking, just by posing this question to you. Just like the topic says, what is the price of freedom for a Ugandan today?
Of course, freedom, we are always free. You don't need a price for freedom. We are always free until something happens and it takes away the freedom. In real sense, if you look at philosophers who first wrote about freedom, of course the medieval ones like John Locke, then you come to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and you come down up to the recent ones in Africa like Nelson Mandela and many others. They have been arguing that freedom is always there. Men are born free. But the trouble has been with some group of people who come and take away the freedom. You saw in the Roman Empire, which for a very long time was a tormentor of people in the world. Then there came colonialism in Africa, in Third World, many other places. And then we had freedom fighters fighting for freedom, especially in Africa and the Third World, to create independence. At first, people thought that they were free. Later, they discovered that they had just changed from colonialists to now their own tormentors. And that has continued up to today. So freedom in Africa is a complicated thing to an extent that even in some African traditions, they discourage talking about a lot of freedom. And that has been the language in Uganda, for instance, where people are, you see somebody talking ignorantly, that a lot of freedom is bad because it breeds anarchy. And you wonder how freedom would breed anarchy if there is no problem. Going to the story that I've been in Uganda, and it's unfortunate that NRM and NRA blended itself on the fight for freedom. In fact, they were called freedom fighters. beginning with Fronasa, then later NRM in the Bush War. But if somebody asked, is that what they have brought in the country? It depends where you stand. If you are being guarded by police and you have a huge office, you are in government and getting a huge salary, you will say there is a lot of freedom. In fact, there are people who argue that in Uganda there is a lot of freedom. So much so that you can say what you want, you can do what you want. But that depends on where you are sitting. When you're on the side of the downtrodden, you find that there is no freedom. If you have been arguing about this security and the people not knowing about national security and the individual security. In Uganda, when you talk about national security, it is in abundance. But individual security, oh, that one is a very rare thing. In my village, when I was growing up, sleeping with the goats would be looked at as one of the, you would be really, people would wonder what type of man or woman. You are sleeping with goats and chicken.
In the same
in the same house, in the same house. But today, if you left your goats to sleep there alone, you wake up when they are not there. And yet we have police, we have everybody. So much so that in my village now, some people don't only stop at sleeping with the goats, but you have to tie the rope and put it on your leg, so that when they touch the goat, you will feel the thing. So because of that, in Uganda, freedom must be fought for. There is a price for freedom. Just as we talk right now, all the public universities in Uganda are on strike, except one, Makerere University. This is very surprising. In Makerere University, the Vice Chancellor has stopped. Staff cannot even hold a meeting on campus. Even as we talk right now, they were supposed to have a meeting at 2 to see how their problems can be sorted. The university is a garrison of soldiers. Just professors, cooks, and other people who want, they don't have any gun. They don't have even a knife. They don't have even this butida that they are going to shoot anyone. But they are members, there is everything that they should not meet just to discuss their issues. And the issue they are discussing is not even with the Makerere University. The issue they are discussing is with the government of Uganda. They want salary harmonization. So other universities, Kyambogo, Mbarara, Busitema, Gulu, have already met and declared. But Makerere cannot. If Makerere cannot have freedom, in 1990s, in fact 1980s, early 1980s, there was a conference for all African academics. And in Makerere, they declared something called academic freedom, which was later reinforced in the University of Dar es Salaam. In Makerere now, to teach, there is a professor who gave a test basing on the Speaker of Parliament. He had to be summoned to the disciplinary committee. How do you dare speak about the Speaker of Parliament? In Makerere University, Faculty of Law. Now, if you are talking about price, to an extent that in a university, you cannot talk about certain things. In fact, they are going to edit out certain topics that they should not be spoken about. Recently, you saw in the Parliament of Uganda, a report was presented by a lawyer, a very senior lawyer, the one they have been even advocating to become the Attorney General of Uganda, and many other big offices, is fit to be a judge, that now in Parliament, no MP is allowed to speak about the president if it is not by motion. And I said now, if in the Parliament people are not going to speak about the president, so very soon on these talk shows, they will have to give you moderators that this topic cannot be discussed. This one can be discussed. These are the things that have brought Kizza Besigye problems.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you. Let me move to you, Mr. Ochieno. Again, the same question. When we talk about the price of freedom in the context of Uganda, also bearing in mind events that we've seen unfold over the last 48 hours or so, we're hearing reports of members of the NUP party being abducted or kidnapped for whatever reason. And if we are to go back to January 16th on, I think the CDF on his X handle actually posted something to the effect that opposition politicians and NUP actors in particular, let me actually just be very specific and read what he actually said, because I think I just took a screenshot of it somewhere. He said, I give permission, that was on the 16th of January, I give permission from today for all security agencies to arrest on the spot any NUP or other opposition group wearing anything resembling a military uniform, and those who do not respect this order have their own problems. And we are seeing, of course, these kinds of abductions coming in. I'm not saying he is behind this, but the kind of messaging that he puts forward clearly sends a certain message as well to people. So if we're talking about the price of freedom, I'd also like us to be alive to the current realities that we are actually seeing playing out. But also, what sacrifices are Ugandans paying or making individually in their pursuit for political change?
You know, when I was coming, I thought it was a very straightforward topic. And then as I sat and Dr. Ojambo begins to submit, I find myself in an unusual state, and I've done this work for a long time, but an unusual state not to know which line to pick. And in any case, being an average scholar amongst everything else, I am also trained to be able to give concept, context, and therefore also to say, like what they would expect of their students, to give definition of terms, which are now leave to the academic. What is freedom? Look, it is genuinely shocking. I'll just take it this way. It's actually genuinely shocking that we're discussing this topic today. But what came to my mind immediately as you invited me was to look at the historical trajectory of the fight for freedom in our country. That then takes me back to really the pre-independence. I don't go as far as the historians would do, but really in context, the beginning of the political organizations and movements. And I think before we came on air, our colleagues were talking about the background of Dokolo and how the King of Uganda, Bunyoro, and others found themselves taking refuge, in certain parts of Lano. And all these guys were trying to protect the basic rights and freedoms of their people in their territories and their communities, and then broadly later that of the Republic of Uganda. Fast forward, you can then see where the founding parents of the Uganda National Congress, at the time before that in Buganda, the Butaka Bataka Party, people were arguing and agitating for, again, rights to fair prices for their crops, access to education, where Asians versus Bazungu, and whether or not the African too had a right in their own nation states. And if it was not even political, in this case, why can't we produce our coffee and make sure that we get fair wages for it? And if we're selling our labor, meaning that even if we're cleaning our state house for the Bazungu who are in charge there, that we are paid also reasonably. But also then come my grandfather, who broke his leg, whose leg was actually broken by the British fighting for independence. Part of theirs was the battle against the poll tax, which they thought was an impunitive colonial tax that was then being used to massively exploit the economic well-being of the African citizen who owns the republic. And part of that money was in any case going a little bit proportion to the Buganda kingdom, but most of it to the British. Context and background. Fast forward, independence. At independence, quite clearly we thought we're claiming the rights of our nation state. Contextually, this fight for freedom. While generally Uganda did not go through the Kenyan and others and Southern African way, I believe that the workings of the various kingdoms, the working of the political leaders at different stages, the conversations between Busoga and others, and then eventually leading us to the Lancaster House Agreement in London, which sometimes people tend to dismiss for political reasons, but these were basically our leaders at the time trying to say that let's come together and create a new nation for ourselves. In my opinion, those would be fights. Those would be struggles. In many cases, they're predominantly men. Some of them would have left their wives at home and have spent weeks. Some of them possibly would have walked distances that these days we only need to drive. And many of them possibly would have sold their only 2-3 herds of cattle that they've got in order to pay for the price, if you like to say it from that perspective, including their time and their sleeps. And some of them, because many of them were very fantastically young guys, maybe some of them expected to go and meet their girlfriends over the weekend, but they didn't, and all their boyfriends, and basically weddings and marriages, those are still sacrifices, those are offers these guys did to independence. From independent Uganda until today, we had issues. We'll be told about how the army mutiny did in the 64, these guys, pushing for pay rise, terms and conditions at work. We will talk about the issues around the referendum question, the lost counties, conflict between Uganda, Bunyoro, and then central government. Then we can fast forward to 1966. But before that, I also know things that historians don't want to cover about, where the dispute between Uganda and central government led to assassination attempts on the Prime Minister in 1965. In many of those would be nuanced political things for which people may be arrested, people may be detained, people will go through these processes around their security. But of course, then the major thing is 1966 that people like to talk about. But at the time, it was basically a conflict between two states, as it were, and ended whichever way it did. You can fast forward to 1969. I had my good brother, Elias Lukwago, the other day talking about the pigeonhole constitution and the detention of that trial of the ministers. And he, for the first time, says what I would like him to have said, and including academicians like this, that the detention without trial was actually legislated. Now, part of the legislation, now that's my beginning first. Part of the legislation there was a recognition done by the state. This is over, really coming to 60 years ago, But the state legislating it against the background of a group of men, predominantly men, who were threatening to break up the Republic of Uganda. And all of them, those guys were from either organized opposition parties, but many of them is now known, and historians again will go, we're dealing with foreign states, in this case particularly the CIA and others, to break the Republic of Uganda. And breaking the Republic of Uganda because the Republic of Uganda was not only committed to liberation struggle in Southern Africa, but also actively committed in trying to protect Congo, that Congo should not break up after Patrice Lumumba. Freedoms, fightings, state playing its part, whatever you do. I want to bring it fast forward because it's merely introductory element. Today, how can anybody justify a kidnap of a Ugandan citizen from Nairobi? How can anybody justify the state in which Kizza Besigye now lives in detention? How can anybody justify an army commander uttering what he has to utter? How can anybody justify an abuse and use of those terms, calling our legislators clowns? How? Today. Prices nearest is in a mean's time, people disappear, including Ben Chwaruka. Prices, the liberation struggle which Museveni has now sunk, which is the 1979 liberation war, because that was the active liberation struggles. People gave their lives and times and efforts. Fast forward, we can talk about the conflict between 1979 and 80, and including how the NRA guys came. But anything else before that, I would call them real struggles for freedom as to. But as far as we are concerned today, no, I think we are in a state of anarchy. It's a very dangerous state. You realize that it's very difficult for me to immerse myself onto the topic because I didn't see it coming.
Thank you very much. Honourable Salaamu, your political career was largely shaped and profoundly impacted by Dr. Kizza Besigye, I want to assume. In this room, you're the one person who knows him better than any of us because of all the years you spent with him. And I know on Wednesday you were with him, you were in court when he was brought to court. And There's a lot. Probably you can write a book. There's so much that you know about the man that we don't. When you see these situations evolving as they are, how would you say this case of Dr. Besigye and the political prisoners has shaped or impacted our political landscape?
Well, my politics and my political life has been shaped largely by what my brother Ochieno here has described so ably. I was privileged to be the first cohort that was graduated by President Museveni. And so I can track the entire trajectory before and after. At that time, we could happily say to ourselves that never again will we experience the pain of fighting for freedom again. And so when I joined politics for the Constituent Assembly, my drive was that now this was our opportunity. It wasn't Lancaster, it wasn't Pigeonhole. This was made by us, for us. That was the dream that we all believed would take us to the place we are yearning to be. And so I was also privileged to be in the first parliament that was implementing the new constitution. And we wanted to give it full effect, the full length and breadth of it. We had the latitude and the goodwill for all of us to partake of what our forefathers had fought for, had failed, had juggled, and now it was our time. Now, I come to meet Dr. Besigye at the time when we believed that impunity was beginning to happen, and we need to nip it in the bud. They were untouchable ministers, untouchable people that had come from the bush. And we thought, no, this needs to be nipped in the bud, and we need to do something about it, and we had the constitutional capability to do so. And so we started using that capability, censures, asking people to resign, clean up the mess, and allow Ugandans to breathe.
If you don't mind, to protest, to talk,
to discuss.
Yes.
We reached out to the whole country. We went countrywide. It was the time of war. We even went to the war situations just to give this good feeling to the rest of Uganda that you have a team here that believes we can make it together and succeed under this new leadership. And so then I began to see that actually there was something wrong with this system. I was able to detect it early enough, and I began asking questions. And we had this feeling as young people then that the president was okay. The problem was the people he was working with. And so we were trying to help the president to clean up his government so that he could give us the fundamental change that he promised the country. And we wanted to give effect to the 10-point program and all this. And then we said, no, something is wrong. And when we began to censure, then the raw state power, I confronted the raw power that was behind these thefts. And that's how I got introduced to Dr. Besigye, a quiet man, a man in uniform, a man who didn't speak much. He actually just looked at us. And when we asked him to edit what we were writing, he was so good to look through and say, this doesn't make sense, improve it here and there. Fast forward, then the amendment of the Constitution, the articles that we had not even put into use, the very things that excited me into getting into politics. the stability, the promise of stability. And so, when 1999 he authored that document, I thought, for me, the facade had been broken of who these guys were. But also, when I was coming to Parliament, I had been sent with a charge. An elders had put me aside and said, you know, Salaamu, you're going to Kampala, but know that governments have their owners. And I said, who are the owners of this one? So I dared to ask. And the response I got already sent early warning signs to me that this wasn't it. What people believed it wasn't. So I was then, the responsibility fell on me to promote the party, Forum for Democratic Change. We had juggled with the idea that let's join DP. But DP had been so badly beaten through the years. Then we thought, what about UPC? And UPC had also suffered the same fate. CP was invisible. So we decided, together with all these actors, that listen, let's put a new platform on which to grow the new democracy. So we named it Forum for Democratic Change. That's why it's not Freedom Party or anything. It was a platform for us to pursue this. But we weren't on the same page. And so the responsibility fell on me, and people actually censured me and said, they sat in their living rooms and said, it can't be that girl. Who is she? And who was I? Anyway, they were right. But I said, if the responsibility has fallen on me to be the face of this party, to steer it, I will do my part, and I did my part. And so I hold that historical responsibility, that I was there at the birth of this idea. We went to South Africa, where Dr. Besigye had gone into self-exile, to convince him to return home. And the questions he put to me then have not been answered yet. And our understanding then was that, listen, they will kill him in South Africa. And for you who have seen how the Kabareves were attacked in hotels, we knew he would be the target. And so we decided, come and die from home. If the bottom line is there, the price of what we are doing, come and die from home. And so today, I can tell the country that for me and others like me, we are waiting to receive Dr. Besigye's body. Because Dr. Besigye is in prison illegally. And Dr. Besigye will not plead with President Museveni, will not negotiate, will not cut deals for his freedom. And I know we have been told in the court martial that it's not the law that is at play. It is the macho-ness. It is about conquest. And I'm told it comes from the Bahima conquest. That in anthropology, it is said that when a Muhima wanted to speak, a Mwiru had to open their mouth so the sputum doesn't fall on the floor. And that psyche is evident in this case. Besigye will be dehumanized. Besigye will be humiliated until he crawls for pardon. And the Besigye I know will not. And he doesn't promise what he won't do. That being the stalemate, because the Supreme Court has done its part. You know, he has been kidnapped, trumped up charges for over the years. I have been with him, I can read him. And when all is said and done, today there was supposed to be no argument whatsoever. There was an opportunity to give him his freedom. It didn't happen. And he's weakening every day. And so I can just tell you that we are waiting for his body. I am also aware that even his body will be imprisoned. But that's what I'm waiting for. So if you ask again, what's the price? It's life. What bothers me a lot is that in 1989, in apartheid South Africa, when Mandela was imprisoned in Robben Island, he contracted tuberculosis. The Boers took Mandela to a first-class health facility to cure. The black Boer today in Uganda will not allow Dr. Besigye that. And so we wait for his body on a day at a time of God's choosing.
Thank you, Honourable. Quite heavy. I'll move to you, Honourable George. I don't know if I should still ask you the same question or give you another one. But I know you'll still, of course, respond to the prize, the question of the prize of freedom, what it means, of course, to you from your perspective. Everyone has their own perspective. Like the previous speakers have submitted, when the NRM came to power, I think I wasn't there at that time, but from what I read and from what I hear, there was jubilation, there was excitement that they were here to correct historical pasts. They were here to heal Ugandans of the pain they had gone through in the past. 40 years down the road, the feeling is that the party or the government has departed from the very script it read to Ugandans at the time. And it is pretty much doing the very ills it purposed to correct. Does the NRM government think it is actually a liberating force in this country, or does it also sometimes see that it is perpetuating oppression in some areas? I don't know what your thinking would be.
Judith, first of all, that is an unfair question to me, because actually that question should have gone to
he will respond to that as well.
Major Awich for two reasons. One, that he was knee-deep in the NRA struggle as a Kadogo. Therefore, he knows the motivations much better than me and experienced it. Secondly, that he works in the NRM Secretariat, so he is a legitimate voice to speak for the party. But I'm a member of the party, so I will attempt to say one or two things. First, freedom is a universal concept, and it is abstract, just like we have laws and institutions. They are abstract, but they find expression in our voices, in our choices, in our actions, in the ability for us to exercise what again I would call abstract, our rights, our conscience. So if you ask me, I will tell you that freedom is a way of life. And therefore, we must continue as long as we exist to fight for freedom. Because where human beings are involved, there is certainly going to be contestations of ideas, contestations for power, contestations for resources. All these contestations require a sense of freedom for them, for us to be able to achieve them. So the frontiers of the struggle for freedom continue to evolve, because the struggle for freedom is a moving target. So what probably happened in the 1970s is different from what happened in the 1980s, and it's different from what happened in the 2000s and so on and so forth. So it's our ability to redefine what our interests are and be able to situate freedom and fight for it. So what is the price of freedom? The price of freedom is life. You must continue, it's a way of life. You must continue to fight for freedom. Now, the NRM government, I think in the last 40 years, has continued to present itself to wananchi so that wananchi can evaluate its performance. And on the basis of that, it derives its mandate to form the state. We can discuss the conduct of the state. We can discuss specific issues, and that's why I would rather that we also get into the specifics so that we address them. As a member of East African Parliament, I know that we have provisions in the treaty that provide for cooperation of partner states in areas of freedom, the rule of law, and the protection of the rights of citizens. Where we are now is a contested zone, and these are very interesting times for the country, I can say, because we seem to be struggling to find our true north. And the jury is out. Each one of us must take their responsibility. I always say that when faced with a situation like this one, there is a limit to how much you can be neutral. Neutrality has its place. I don't think the choice of freedom and justice is one of them. Thank you.
Before I actually proceed to Major, I like how you bring the regional perspective. And unfortunately, we've not had clearly voices from the region speaking clearly, especially at the government, at the political decision-making level, condemning what is happening in Uganda.
Who exactly are you talking about? Presidents, foreign ministers,
yes,
commander-in-chiefs, CDFs, or army commanders? What happened to the title army commander and CDF? Did I miss anything? Those titles.
We shall come back to that. Let's Honourable George first to finish his response.
You see, there are jurisdiction issues. And I have had civil society calling out governments, but you see, in its current formation, the EAC respects and preserves sovereignty. And I say that, this thing called sovereignty is something that has weakened the East African community, because there are those matters that they will say should be exhausted at the sovereign level. before then they become legitimate issues for discussion at the regional level. And even if they raise some of those matters, they are really
Guarded.
very well guarded. There's some level of political correctness in addressing matters that touch on sovereign states. So until it is raised by a particular sovereign state, in this case, until in the case of Besigye, this is a matter between Uganda and Kenya. Until Kenya and Uganda begin that conversation, it is still treated as a sovereign matter of Uganda.
I'll get a follow-up question for that at a later time, but let me move on to Major, because you've just opened a very interesting dimension to this conversation, which I would like us to explore a little later on. Major, I think now the question has been passed on to you. He dodged that. I don't know if you would like me to repeat or
I have actually not dodged.
No, you've not dodged, but
I
it
have
is not.
passed it to the right.
Yeah, you just
I have
handed it over to the right person to respond.
That he can set the tone,
Yes.
and actually I can
No
put in
problem.
an addition to that.
Okay,
That's
I'll
his
do that.
bucket.
But me, I'm also interested in the original text.
Question, which is fine, which is very
The
fine.
original text of the question, if not properly discussed, can be misleading. Because the topic is saying the cost of freedom.
The price of freedom,
The
yes.
price of freedom in Uganda, the Dr.Kizza Besigye case. Well, I don't want to be like some students we used to have who would revise to spot a question. So he has revised for that the question that will come is the causes of trans-Saharan trade. Now, if the real exams come transatlantic, he will say, if you had asked for transatlantic, and he continues to answer about he leaves the real question. In other words, I'm not comfortable with the question. The framing of the question to me is biased. First, it puts on one person, and secondly, it presupposes that there's no freedom in Uganda. So we are asking the price. So the question is very badly framed. That biases the opinion. It presupposes a lot, and it over-contextualizes. Because what I'm saying is that if we don't presuppose that there's no freedom, and you put the question as such, assuming now you are telling a child of 12 years or 13 years, the cost of freedom, in the price of freedom in Uganda, then you would have to really make a holistic presentation to this child, what it amounts to a cost of freedom, without biasness. And therefore, you are going to discuss it in its historical context, contemporary and future. But if you put it in a biased way, like, you know, ladies and gentlemen, Museveni or NRM has removed freedom already, and now what is the price? That is what this question presupposes, which I object seriously. Now, be as it is, me, I know as a witch that historically and even contemporary, there is a price to freedom. And the price of freedom, if you put it in a historical context, there is record to show. For example, for those who saw with Museveni that there was no freedom, and maybe you can see those who see it now, the test is in practice. You know, we can think and theorize, but there's a test. A test of practice proves whether you are right or wrong. Even if you went to a laboratory for a scientific test in laboratory, the result, the test of the authenticity is in the practice. And therefore, the fact that 27 guns could maneuver protracted struggle and win is a testimony that what they presume as lack of freedom was there, and they achieved it. And if you look at that, the cost was what? For example, the cost in the NRA urge for freedom was that many people committed class suicide Class suicide in a case, for example, that you were a family background like Mugisha Muntu, a family of means, a family of resources, but you decide that no, you know what, I have this family, but I'm going to fight. And you enter and you go naked, you go hungry, you fight. So and many people came from that background, including the Jim Mwezi. These are children from semi-aristocratic, sons of big reverends, whatever, you know, the reverends, they have the property, these traditional reverends, they were propertied people. So that is one of the costs of freedom, to commit class suicide, to go for an aim and get it. The other price of freedom, of course, is death. In the war, in the NRA case, people fought, people died, leave alone injured. I am also a casualty in my leg. I can remove you, see it. So these are part of the price for freedom. That is it. You also have prizes like the normal, I mean, people, I think Congress attempted it, people left, there would have been loved ones to marry, and you choose to pursue a struggle. So the price of freedom in Uganda, or even in any other country, is abound in ideal form, and therefore, whoever takes on a path to secure freedom knows there's a cost for price, I mean a price for freedom. At this stage, I would like to say that freedom has been codified. In other words, the codification simply means what we think but has been put down in writing. The beauty of it is that it stops us from saying whatever we think amounts to freedom. Because now, if somebody chooses to fight, say he wants political power, regardless whether the one in power is bad or not, because in a political contestation, ideally everybody has a freedom to say, I want power. Whether you are JEMA, whether you are UPC, DP, FDC, whoever, you have your thinking and you think you are right. Now, your feeling to want the power is now therefore, if you don't get, or whatever you are getting, it is freedom. That is why freedom goes to be codified in the Constitution and relevant legislations. Freedom to this, freedom to this, freedom to this, right to this, right to this. Therefore, if we, by any sense, think that there is no freedom for that implied sense to the case at hand, then we may at one point go to the checklist. How about this freedom? Is it there? How about this freedom? I have always told my friends, and I've really replied with force, that people seem not even to know there's a freedom called freedom from fear, and that people should live without fear, and it is a freedom. So therefore, we should not mistake one's activity or move to capture state power, and we call it lack of freedom. In which case, all these parties, all these organizations, all these movements, then who are agitating to get it, if it veered off to a wrong approach, for example, an illegal means, say use of arms, then he will say, my freedom is tampered with. To avoid that ambiguity, where everybody will claim what he wants is freedom, is why it is codified. So that we have a checklist, but we tend to set the list and the codification aside, and we just front forward our interest. So I don't get this, you have tampered with the freedom. I don't get this, you have tampered with the freedom. And therefore, we have freedom can be, the cost can be met from many cases. If you want to say, and this is in ideal sense, whether in Uganda or any other country, even if you're in government and you want to secure freedom, if, for example, the status quo doesn't warrant that, then you may pay a price. If you're religious leaders, you may pay a price. So what I'm saying here is freedom in whatever setting, in whatever country, if it is impeded, it has a price. But I am saying that we should be careful not to discuss it from a point of view that it is a settled matter that there's no freedom now. So we start from that. That's a very bad point of departure. That's a very bad point of departure. Because if some of us talk about the freedom that we see, we can compare ourselves around the region.
Which is what we also want to hear.
If we talk about the region, for example,
phrasing of this topic does not limit you.
Did you know that some countries, for example, you can even give an example of Rwanda, that you have such a straight-jacketed kind of society, that the society is really governed with don'ts and do's, don'ts and do's, don'ts and... Here, why some people, the professor is saying we even abuse the freedom. For example, you'll be driving to Wandegea and you find this side is for coming, this side is for going. And you see all the border boys are riding the wrong way. You don't do that in some other country.
That's not freedom.
Never. You
That's
don't.
Not freedom.
They don't.
That's
So
not freedom.
that's why we are saying
That's not
that
freedom.
even us here, look at the region, we don't have that straight jacket kind of the running of society. It is well known in the world that the freedom in Uganda and the perceptibility, especially to foreigners, for a long time Uganda has been number one, friendly. I give you a notebook.
No.
It has been number one friendly because he wants to interfere with it. He wants to interrupt me. Number one country in friendliness. Until recently, Turkey took over. Turkey took over. Turkey took over, and I'm told Turkey took over not the natural freedom and friendliness Uganda do. Turkey took over because Turkey is a gate for refugees entering Europe. So European countries put in a lot of money in Turkey to be a buffer zone. So Turkey pretends to be happy with refugees to keep them there. But we do it natural and with government policy. Save from the fear of misappropriation of funds to the refugee program. But the policies, the laws in place, the friendliness, we are there. And again, back to the freedom that I'm saying that exists. We are even better off than America.
Hey.
Because the American society is based on, it's not a free nature like in society. It is based on rule of law. Rule of law. Why? Because the community in America, they exterminated the Red Indians and imported foreign communities. The French, the German, the English, the what. So you have no culture and norms to govern the society. So you have a law hanging on top of everybody. Unlike in UK, which went to the lake, crystallized its civilization, and from there it's the only country, democratic country, without a constitution. Why? Because the crystallization of the society knows do's and do
No, they
not.
have a constitution.
So, which is a constitution? Is there a
It's
constitution?
unwritten.
Yes,
but it's
only
there.
the British have unwritten constitutions.
Unwritten.
Yes, it is
Yes,
unwritten.
that's what I said.
No, but it
Yes,
was
so
built
that's
through-
what I'm saying. So
but
you
no,
have,
it's-
so the civilization
Just a minute.
is
Let him-
unwritten constitution because you know
Yeah, you
the
are
do's
correct.
and the do nots.
Yeah, you are correct.
So I am saying that even in America now, you are so much governed with that do's and do nots that you basically don't call it freedom, unlike what we have here. I have repeatedly said, say for example, freedom of speech. In every district of 151 districts in Uganda, there are radio stations. And every day people are talking and abusing Museveni and all that, and everybody goes home. Okay? Including cartoons. So I am objecting to the framing of the topic and the fact that the point of departure is that there's no freedom. I don't believe in it. But I know in any country around the world, there is a price for freedom. Even in Switzerland, even in Singapore. So if we are to tell our children about this topic, the price of freedom, we should talk it in a balanced way, not in a wrong way with a wrong point of departure.
Your submission. I want the three of you now to respond because I'm sure you've been taking notes. Major says the topic is wrong, but the phrasing of the topic is wrong, or the framing rather is wrong. But he says there's freedom in this country. That's another point of departure. But you people say in this context, but also historically, you've given examples of the contestations that we've had in the agitation for freedom in the Ugandan society.
Just before he comes in, the topic as presented to me when he invited me here does not suggest that there are no freedoms, and nor is anybody saying that there are no freedoms from the context of Comrade Awich's suggestion. Comrade Awich is trying very hard to deflect away from the primary topic of conversation today, but carry on.
Yeah, thank you. You know, that's how I started, that this can only be said from where you stand. And it's a very difficult position. It's a very, very difficult position. The only time you know why freedom is very, very important is when you don't have it. That's when you know that I really need freedom. One time they arrested our vice chancellors of Kyambogo University, vice chancellor and the leaders of Kyambogo University. And these were big men. They had never stepped in a police case. Some of them had never even gone there to report a case, because you see, for us academics, really, you don't have much like the businessmen and the politicians do. So I found these men. One of them was a very proud professor from Teso. And they had told him to remove his shoes. And he had removed his shoes. He was stepping on the floor. So when he saw me, he almost wanted, I don't know, to burst and die. He said, look at these people. They have put me here. I don't have shoes. I'm sitting with the criminals, and they're telling me that I'm going to enter there. He was talking about the cell. I told him, Prof, here you are going to enter there. There is no choice. You are going to enter. But be calm. We are going to bring you slippers, and we shall talk to the OC later to keep you somewhere, not there. He now knew the importance of freedom. And that's why I told you that freedom is a natural thing. You only get to talk about its absence when it is taken off from you. Now let's put matters to context. Of course, Uganda was running very well until we introduced the military into the police in our recent history. And some of us were against this for some time until now it is bad. You remember yesterday we lost Kosi Odomel. Kosi Odomel was the second last police officer to lead Uganda police. Of course, there was a man later. He came from Kasesa, forgotten his name, the last police officer. Then there came Katumba Wamala. Katumba Wamala was the first person to engineer militarization of police in Uganda. And this man, Katumba Wamala, the only difference was that he was a diplomat, a military diplomat. He would talk well with the people, do those things quietly there militarily, introduce UPDF into police, but he would do. One good example is when one of my colleagues was shot at UPC offices, some late Genyi. He came and apologized and said these people are going to be followed, the police officer has been arrested and will be dealt with. Katumba Wamala was then replaced by Kale Kaihura, the worst that has happened to our
Terror.
This is the man who introduced even number plateless vehicles, arresting people and taking them for detention. The first time there was an election in Bukomansimbi, and the taximen, people from taxi, these normal taxis, came with the sticks and they were beating people and picking the people from the polling station. And they asked the IGP, those people who are arresting people, who are they? He said, I don't know them. And they asked, then, if you don't know them as a police officer, why didn't you command that they are arrested? He said, I don't know. But it was intended. And people thought that that was a very small thing. It was not going to have impact in Uganda. Later, he started recruiting all forms of police officers, SPCs, I don't know which one. They
Crime
would go,
preventers.
crime preventers, and putting them into police. And those guys later became
Chivoko squad.
big problem, including the Kifesi, this man who was killed recently by a mob justice over land. These are people who are in police. Now, today, as we talk, those days, and Awich knows, that when you are being arrested, the first thing you have to be told why they're arresting you, who is arresting you, because all policemen have an ID. It is called a warrant card for police officers. They have a warrant card. It shows you, I'm a police officer attached to this police station. I have come to arrest, my name is so and so, because their names must be there, but these days they come in plain uniform. I have come to arrest you because of this offense. Do you have anything to say? If you have anything to say, you say, because you are supposed to tell your relatives or your next of kin and so on, and say, I am being arrested, I'm being taken to this police station and so on. That is the normal arrest. Unless somebody is armed and is resisting and what have you, that's when they will use what they call reasonable force. These days arrests, a gang just come, a vehicle being operated in Uganda, it picks an individual, it goes away, and the police denies that we have not arrested anybody. But later, you see that person being presented to court. And you wonder, now, police said they did not arrest. Who arrested? They come and explain to you that these days we work in cooperation. We have UPDF, we have, I don't know, SFC, so we work together. There is a joint, they used to call it JAT, joint something, something, something.
Anti-terrorism
Terror.
Now, if you look at it, let's go back to now Kizza Besigye, the man. How he was arrested was in that format of doing things. I've said here that if somebody is being arrested in a country, there is a procedure that you must follow. This man was just picked because up to today, it is now over 4 months. We should have gotten a statement from Kenya showing how they cooperated with Uganda and Uganda police or whatever an organization on how they arrested this man. Up to date is not known. In other words, if you told the people how this man was arrested, would it affect the case? I don't think so. This man is arrested and not taken to a police post in Uganda or a court of law. They take him to a kangaroo thing in Machindi. We are now calling it kangaroo because it has been ruled kangaroo. Now, this kangaroo thing has brought a lot of problems. And the kangaroo-ness, people talked about safe houses in Uganda. They say they are not there. MPs went, found safe houses. They reported that they have seen the safe houses are there. Nothing is done. This week, just this week, over 10 people are missing. And they are not missing because they are rebels or they have done something, but because they are associated with a certain party, a registered party in Uganda, which is allowed to carry out political activities in our country. And people want to pretend the likes of Major there, and Major really I sympathize with you, but I say that these things, as Honourable said, we don't know when they will get us. We should just condemn them. Because for me, I don't want a situation where I have committed an offense. I have committed an offense, I agree. And somebody just comes, bundles me in a vehicle, takes me away, does not take me to police. Then all of a sudden, I either appear dead, I'm found dead, or not to be found at all, like the Nupu guys who disappeared 4 years ago. They are not found up today. Or a man comes and without telling me something wrong that I have done, he just shoots you. Let me tell you, Judith. If writers, it's only that Ugandan writers are not serious. If somebody wrote down what is happening in Uganda today, the books about Idi Amin would not sell in any shop, because these are things that are happening in the 21st century among leaders who are educated. You can imagine our IGP Kale Kaihura that I was talking about, the former, had a master's in law, biasing in human rights. The current Minister of Internal Affairs is a master's of law, a general of the army. If you are talking about the president, he is a graduate and a person with a vast experience. You can't compare him to General Idi Amin Dada and so many other things. And people come, they defend, they say, oh, Besigye is there, he should answer because he committed an offense. You ask them, which offense? Which offense did he commit? Why don't you present that offense properly in court and is charged? Up to date, they cannot. So for me, I think what is happening in Uganda is just trying to train, and we don't know. Maybe our people don't read history. They are just training anarchists because people are going to give up. And when people give up, they will become, you don't know why an Arab kid in Palestine ties himself with a bomb and says, let me go and die. It is because of the history that they go through. So this bad history in our country, our children are seeing very bad things happen. Then you tell them, oh, Amin was a dictator. What about this one? Isn't he a dictator?
Thank you. Joseph, let me come to you. And actually, Dr. Ojambo has also preempted a question that I had wanted to pose. When you look at the way, again, this Besigye case is being handled, the issue of political prisoners who are still in prison, including those that have been released, and now these kidnappings that we are actually witnessing or hearing about, do these events, in a way, fuel or do they suppress it?
You know, you realize that at the introduction, I thought, is it an introductory conversation I should indulge myself in? Do I lock myself into the emotional realities that we face as a country with Besigye at the helm? Do I try to be as objective as I possibly can as a responsible citizen? And as a political leader, what really is my responsibility? I end up sort of really fumbling. And then, of course, submissions from my colleagues, including a little bit from my colleague from the NRM Secretariat, who has to fight a particular corner, which is generally understandable. And at that stage, sort of, it gets a little bit frustrating. You know, still context of questions, one thing that I omitted to make it as reasonably fair as possible. The earliest part of our independence saw a peoples then substantially aggrieved, and those were the Banyoro of their land. And Banyoro versus Baganda. And we could have talked about emotive in many different ways. But our political leaders at independence realized that this has been a difficult thing. They tried to make it national, indeed they did, made it constitutional, and brought in legislation. And sort of this matter was really resolved through a referendum, where a people aggrieved who found themselves, freedom, injustice, found themselves at a particular corner of another location against their wills, and they consider themselves massively amid exploits. And if you talk about some of what Dr. Ojambo says, because in any case, one of the things we're trying to say as a generation of sort of, like the older one here, for you guys, Judith, and the fantastic young audience who are predominantly yours and your producers, that the issue is, as a country, we should work extremely hard to seek to mitigate all possibilities and potentials for conflict that we see as a country, some of which are very commonsensical. So that was the result. Fast forward, come to Idi Amin's time. Amin comes and targets particular communities, particularly Langa and then all the Luos, but then everybody else who he thought was a threat, and every part of the Republic of Uganda. So Ugandan citizens' freedoms usurped, meaning killed, across the country. There is no part of this country. While the focus was Langa, Choli, and Obote's relatives, including my own father's godson in Toronto, merely because of the soldier and he was, mark of farm, roll them and kill them. That happened. Fast forward, people fight. We say, we are going to get rid of Idi Amin. Judith, I came the day before yesterday from the north. I was delighted to have attended Janani Loom Day, which has been established and designated a national day by this regime, something that I should say, people to say, well done, not thank you, but well done, because it's not a gift, by Mr. Museveni, and actually is noted there. Now the contradiction is, you recognize that Janan Luwum's life, meaning rights, were usurped by a dictatorship, and Luwum's own position as a revered archbishop plus others were simply saying, no, sir, not that way. And the guy gets that. And I use Luwum as an example. So we make these journeys. Museveni's prime minister related to Mabati was there in Nabanja. She came in an aircraft. I didn't want to talk about this thing. So it's fanfare, huge amount of money, public monies, So this is the other day. And I'm returning to Kampala to discuss Kizza Besigye, whose very basic rights are being violated as being suggested. And we want to attempt to fudge an explanation for that. It just does not add up. Now, my own lived experience. I go to Makere, Museveni comes to power, he used his basic rights to form a political party. He founds a political party, people reject him, and then, which was supposed to use basic rights, and he chooses as a matter of freedom to go to the bush. Granted, it works out for him 5 years later, they come to power, they ban political parties, and then they introduce resistance councils, now for the young guys to hear. They bring these things to Makere. Makere, that was before Nawanje, the Chancellor Kada, Vice Chancellor Kada. In Makere University, students refused this thing. And I was one of those who were on the lead to that refusal. It's been suggested as part of the reason for my arrest, torture and detention and exile. Then after that, I'm invited, this I've said it on air, I'm emphasizing the point. The first female guild presidential candidate, Njuba Anora, NRA guys wanted me to, one, head her campaign, and two, use my room to launch a campaign. Quite clearly, I knew because they knew my influence would help. But I simply said at the time that, no, look, I have no issue. Nora, she's a fantastic young lady. But I'm UPC, and we have Chizito, a guy from Mubende, as our candidate, so I couldn't, whatever. Of those, amongst the many other things, I was arrested, tortured, and go those days, what they call them, these safe houses? They call them those different kind of names. People didn't know those things. I've experienced those things. And talk about your professor, George. For the first time in my life, I was arrested as a university student. For the first time in my life, I have never committed anything, even being late at school. Throughout my life, I'm nearly sent to Ochieno, in normal times. And I ended up with the university police. And the guys who come to me, including one of the students, two of them military, armed, others, whatever, about 7, 8 people. You heard my story. And Ochieno man, you're under arrest. Talk freedoms. I didn't really want to discuss, but let me put it into context. It's extraordinary. So actually I was laughing, and then there was Ochieno man, you're not joking, when I started to realize. I walked to the university police station. When I went there at the cell, they're telling me to remove my shoes, to go in. The dungeon I was being taken into, it was extraordinary that I was now I was walking into those funny peas. Not a single offense committed. If anything, Mr. Museveni, in this kind of conversation, I need the man not only to apologize, but I don't know how much I should seek legal recompense for this. Huge. Short bit of it, after those, I escaped exile. 17 years of my life, youthful life, wasted. Fight for freedom. Fast forward. We now come. One of the first terrible things I receive of Kizza Besigye is that time when he's rolled up and thrown into a pickup. Like carcass for hounds, I wrote about it in my paper. The first time I felt this thing about Kizza Besigye. So what is this? And this was evidence from a colleague. Freedoms, rights. What are we talking about? Bring us to today. I am just saying that I find it extremely contradictory of NRA to be subjecting Kizza Besigye, one of their own, to what they're doing, whatever the case. And as I said, if Kizza Besigye is committing an offense, You know, tell us Ugandans, that's our basic right, by the way, to know as citizens. You know, whip him on our behalf, but whip him legally, lawfully. Even if you can't, let the guy go. The guy is frail, let the guy go. If not, I don't see the difference between this NRA regime and any other, because the nearest I would compare them with is Idi Amin's, but not other Idi Amin's time. Do I see some of the things that I've seen on these people? And then to conclude, ironically, the other day as I was coming back, I wanted to tell this to my brother Jacob Oboth, who's Museveni's Minister for Defense. You know, after Bombo, ironically, on my way into Kampala, in my turn to Kawish, you know, these NRA guys nearly want to bump you up. So they're escorting some guy. So these guys talk about rights and, you know, they've got a whole path and they like to do these things. They push you, and even after you've been pushed, one of these guys come and tell, go there, meaning go to the bush. You know, we don't know bushes, you guys know bushes. You know, go down the bush, leave your path. They've got to clear the other way around for some funny Mabati thief, some terrorist from Congo. I do not know. One individual, a truck of, they're pushing people. And you know, I resent that. This other one, you know, and you know, of course my car is clear, I can't afford those with tinted ones. Look, you guys, where do you go? And what is this? In my country, this week, I'm coming from paying the thing for Janan Luum. I know Besigye and his colleagues are suffering here. No, this country is not free. It's not. And if it is, those boys are behaving like that because they know their commander is Museveni's son, who calls the elected legislators what? What's the word again?
Clowns.
Clowns.
Thank you, Joseph.
Atrocious.
Thank you very much. It's time for us to take a break, and then we'll return and still continue with this discussion. Please, just stay with us.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break, and we're glad that you're still with us here on the Citizens Chat Show. My name is Judith Atim, and we're still continuing with our discussion. We're asking, what is the price of freedom in Uganda? And we're looking at the case of Dr.Kizza Besigye and political prisoners. Honourable Musumba, I'm coming to you now. Earlier in his submission, Major Awich talked about the codification of freedoms. And he's, of course, for emphasis, he's not happy with the framing of this topic because in his wisdom, it presupposes that Uganda is not a free country. Now, when we talk about the codification of freedoms, of course, we know the freedoms are provided for in the law, but are these freedoms respected when citizens exercise them? Just this week alone, we've seen people protesting and they've been arrested. The protest to free Dr.Kizza Besigye and free political prisoners, we've seen people arrested. We've seen protests in the past held against corruption and people were arrested. But some recently held a protest, especially the one that was organized by the CDF, and there was no arrest made to that effect so far. So again, I mean, if depending on where you are, you would say yes, freedoms, protests are allowed and respected. But if you are caught, if you're a protester and you end up unfortunately being arrested, then you would actually assume that you know there are no freedoms and the freedoms are not being respected. Just your quick, and also,
you
sorry, before you,
questions, my
sorry,
sister.
proceed.
Well, we are getting into a radicalized, polarized difficult to lead a country, which is not good for all of us. I don't know if you have ever seen an old general in Uganda, and with his chassis, his entire frame deformed, and can't even salute, and is still holding on to power and obstructing people, but leaders to emerge. It's a very frightening sight. I saw it at Tarehe Sita because it was the last year, because it was done in Busoga, and it got me thinking, what kind of future? Because in a home, if there's no air, there's doom. Now, in Uganda, we have always been told that leaders will emerge. But what kind? Now, there's one that is being forced down our throats, that one who was supposed to emerge, and is creating anarchy for himself, for the country. Freedom, as my brother Awich wants to fuzz about, there are political freedoms, there are social freedoms, cultural freedoms, economic freedoms, land freedom. You can name them, you can reel them off, and you can audit each of them over the years. But I'll tell you that political freedoms, religious freedoms have defined who we are. We are a very intolerant community. We are a community of patchwork, because Uganda matters, just Uganda matters. It wasn't a walk in the park. It was brutality. And we pride ourselves about Uganda matters, but this was terror meted onto people. And so, right from those years, terror has defined who we are. You kill a man in Busoga, Huntington, kill, not arrest, not take them into hard labor, but kill. So our entire history has footprints of terror. When we were talking about Dokolo here, and why people are called Badokolo, and the misrepresentation of history, the beauty of solidarity of the kings then, colonial terror. And we would have thought that having gone through the first mistakes we made up till 1979, that we would never ever do the same again. But we are reinventing new terror. Now we are in Congo. We are now mercenaries in Central African Republic. We have commercialized terror, We have pounced on people. A friend of mine told me when the war in northern Uganda was raging, with all that happened in Mukura, what happened in West Nile Bank, when we were starting the FDC, he told me that, listen, when President Museveni loses popular support in Central here, you will test his terror. You will test his terror. And this terror will do around like it has come home to us. It has come home to Dr. Besigye when a revolution begins to eat its own, then you can tell that there's outright trouble. And the glee with which it is done, it's so frightening. Nobody in their right senses ever did what has been displayed to us today. When Dr. Besigye was pepper sprayed, and we believed he had run blind, I thought that was the worst that could happen. But watching him in sandals and the so-called judge says, I cannot, in my court, I cannot entertain a case when the man is, I can see the person is that unwell. Take him back to prison. Take him back to where? To prison. Because if you're unwell, you're taken to hospital. He was so emphatic. Take him back to prison. And that was at the time I was entering on the ground floor. And I think they had pressed the wrong button. And the lift opened while I was looking. And doctor was seated in a wheelchair in the lift, surrounded by these young boys with glee, yelling and yelling and yelling, get out of the way. You would think a terrorist, Lord Joseph Kony, had been caught. And then when they go to the basement, they say, now they can do what they want.
Seriously?
Yeah, they can do what they want. We've taken him out of there. They can do what they want. Because this is fun to his captors. It's fun. I don't know if you've ever seen any film that can communicate this to you. Oh, I remember it maybe in the Wild Wide West, you know, in the conquest and the gold rush of America and all. I can't tell anything like this. Done by people who speak the same language, who fought the same war. And I don't know, they should know better. But that's the situation we're in. And I can't plead that there's freedom. It depends which freedom. Freedom to poverty is plenty. Freedom to terror is in plenty. And all the things that have made Ugandans sleepless. Everybody's waiting for the bad news, and everybody knows what to do when that bad news breaks. They know. They know what to do. And so, I don't know whether you see what I see, but from my standpoint, we're missing an opportunity to patch ourselves up.
Thank you. So, Honourable George, earlier you talked about the issue of political correctness at the regional level and how this also complicates the whole issue of, let's say, peer-to-peer kind of support or review or checks within the region. And I ask, what is the cause for redress?
At the regional level, we have a very limited toolbox. I mean, you must have seen this even when we had conflicts with Rwanda. It took too long. Actually, we had to seek third-party intervention. Essentially because we have, as much as we have the protocols of cooperation, you know, we have the treaty, but as it is right now, the EAC depends largely on the institutions of the partner states to implement the commitments, regional commitments. That's why you'll find that our levels of integration vary from country to country, depending on how each partner state institutions reflect the commitments at the regional level. So, I do not see much forward traction at the regional level with respect to domestic cases. I think for this to gain more traction, I think there is need for citizen agency. And again, personally, I think that we need, as a country, as citizens, to treat more cautiously I read and I hear on social media, there are passions around this case. And actually, sometimes these passions have overtaken the specifics of these cases. You know, so the emotions they're deeply steeped in the emotions. When you see the public commentary on the case that is currently ongoing, the Kizza Besigye case. And I would implore some voices of conscience to come and really try to, you know, to regulate.
Which ones do you think these are in that toolkit?
You can even appoint yourself to be a voice of conscience in this case.
Because for me, my emotions are raw.
Yeah.
I am not the good one.
For example,
so give me another.
For example, I take exception of the characterization of what is going on as an ethnic, you know.
And if it is?
And like what the Honourable Salaamu Musumba said,
and
that,
what if it is?
you know, it is about the Bahiru versus the Bahima. That kind of characterization could have unintended consequences because it inflames passions around ethnicity, and then it diverts the attention from you know, the case that is being,
by the way, doesn't divert.
You know,
it just describes the situation as is where is.
Yes.
Carry on, Honourable.
Yeah. So for me, I think that one of the institutions that actually we need to bring here in this talk show is the UPDF. Because some of the things that we are discussing, the party that is aggrieved is the UPDF.
Why?
No, there's no UPDF. There's government. There's nothing called UPDF. You see, when we distort governance, by the way, UPDF is so much in the front when it is supposed to be the Minister of Defense speaking. You see, this distortion cannot be allowed to carry on. That you have an army man where the Constitution states that the military shall be subordinate to civilian authority, and you bring them still back in the domain. For me, I'm looking for Desmond Tutu.
Who would be our Desmond Tutu in this case that you can think of?
I think we need consensus. We need consensus in spite of our the differences in our political persuasions. I think where the country is, we should be moving in the direction of building consensus on what is in the best interest of the country.
I want
for
that.
the country.
Please teach me. I want.
So, I want us to have the likes of Salaamu Musumba coming forward and, you know, being given the platform
Which
to completely blow out. And allow other people to completely blow out, so that then after that we begin to, you know, pull in the same
together,
you know, in the same direction. So once there is that meeting of mind, but there should be somebody to initiate that conversation. Unfortunately, we seem not to identify who is this net aggregator.
In the absence of that, if you don't mind, in the absence of that, in the Salaamu's end, the other, on the opposite end, who do you think would be such kind of person?
On which opposite end?
The aggressor.
From the aggressor.
Who is the aggressor?
Okay, from the state side, if you like. I would say.
Well, I think the state is competent to choose who
represents
their best interest. But for me, what I'm looking at is that we must have a conversation as a country, okay, and identify who best represents different shades of opinion, and have consensus, build consensus on what is best for the country. In the absence of that conversation, we are pulling far and far apart, and there is extremism that is building up, and that's not very, very good for the country. There is a lot of toxicity, which is being driven by extreme positions on both sides, on those who are supporting government and those who are in the opposition. And that is not very, very good for the
Opposite to the
country.
issues.
Because I think competition is good, but when it becomes very toxic, then it is it's mutually assured destruction. Yeah, because it doesn't really matter who is the perceived winner in this case, but all of us are the net losers. So I think the country should be gravitating towards, okay, now we have gotten to this position. What is the best? Let's have a conversation and have consensus on what best represents the way forward.
Thank you.
I'm reminded, I had a conversation in Canada, Toronto, with Ugandans in the diaspora at the heat of coin war. And the people in the room asked, who kills more, the winner or the loser? The victor or the vanquished? Who kills more in a war situation? It's the victor. That's how people call themselves winner, because they have killed the majority of their opponents. And so we are back in that same situation. To be defined as a victor in Uganda's political context today, you must kill, you must maim, you must detain as many as you can. If that is the mindset which continues around us, the consensus will be settled on who kills more.
Thank you. Honourable, have you finished? Oh,
Yes.
you still, okay, thank you. Let me now come to you, Major Awich. Of course, you have the opportunity to respond to whichever issue has been raised here. But my question to you, I'll be picking from the tail end of George's submission about the issue of having a conversation on how to build consensus. And this is something that has been talked about in multiple spaces and fora, that perhaps Uganda needs to actually have this conversation and address the elephant in the room. But what then does it take, and how do we get there?
You see, that debate has been held for long. I think Honourable Mao has been a mouthpiece for that for a long time, until when he became a minister, he kind of lost the steam.
No, it had achieved this.
But some of us were asking that Article 1 says power belongs to the people. You subject the country to election. Each party presents their manifesto. And the winning party X has the mandate. In what constitutional framework does this, we call it the national conference or the national consensus?
National dialogue, it was called
National
once.
dialogue, where does it come? Because the winning party is saying, look, I've just got mandate from the people and I put my manifesto clearly. And the people, at least the people that voted me, are not saying we are coming from a war, or you see, like you had in South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation. The Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa had a backing, a set background. That here you have just dismantled a political regime which was disputed worldwide. It was apartheid regime, which clearly said the blacks and whites should be separate. And then there are actions of the white state in power which did that. And they're also saying the black South Africans fought for freedom and also caused some mayhem. You know, there was clear divide. And this background set the basis for the Truth and Reconciliation. But it becomes difficult for a party in Uganda where you, for example, you have no internal conflict. What we see is individuals or parties expressing their views. Now, how do you factor in views in a national conference? One way of factoring views was for you to compact your views into your manifesto and go to the people. Now you put that in your manifesto to the people and people didn't vote for you. Now you lost the election. Now you're going around again to say, no, even if I have lost the election, let us talk. Wonder what framework?
But
It's completely different. It's completely different from a background where countries have had truth and reconciliation. Truth and Reconciliation Commission, like in South Africa, like, has a basis, a clear basis. I don't see that. I told Mao, I said, Mao, then when do we go back to the people who voted us with our manifesto and tell them what? Maybe if we are to do that, we start from the manifesto so that people vote for us, knowing that in your manifesto you will have truth and reconciliation. It lacks legal basis, it lacks its social basis, the societal framework, and I don't see it. I don't see it's contradictory. It's a wish of people who have lost, wanting another window to negotiate positions. I am really, I don't see.
But Major, you talk about a winning party, or that of course gets to power. But we also know for a fact that the integrity of our elections over the years has been questionable. It is one thing, it has been proven so. And also we know that even if the winning party takes over or gets another mandate, even among those who voted it or gave it that second mandate, there are sometimes contestations or dissatisfaction that comes up. And there are those who feel, look, we elected you because you promised ABCD, but now you are not delivering on that promise, and therefore we don't have confidence in you anymore. Would you also dismiss these kinds of sentiments from people who actually were members of that party and believed in that party?
Two things. The ineffectiveness of electoral process. If you say that we have held election, but the election is ineffective, then let it be addressed as such. There are ways of addressing ineffective electoral process. You either amend the electoral laws, or you go to courts for disapproval of what transpired in the election. Address it as such. Then, in the other way where you are saying, they are now saying you are not delivering. One way of checking on non-delivery is in the next election. But if you think one way is by calling a national conference or truth and reconciliation, that is where some of us will question. Truth and reconciliation
Is there a
institutions.
danger in that?
I insist that truth and reconciliation bodies that have existed in whatever country in the world has a basis.
George.
Case in point is South Africa.
Let George.
I think to limit consensus building to negotiation for power, I think is wrong. The consensus we're looking at here is broadly as a method of governance, you know, so that you can be able to sieve on a case-by-case basis what is best practice.
And
you know,
in national interest,
and
I believe I'm still on the floor.
and in building for the
They're
future.
just making
I
brief.
believe I'm still on
They're
the
just
floor.
making brief rejoinders.
Yeah,
You still have the floor.
that
Yes.
can be legislative. Yeah, the same thing that Major Awich here is saying, that okay, if at all there are gaps in our electoral system, that could have been the reason why we have problems with our elections. Then let us build consensus on what works, yeah, and recommend and actually implement them. Then what else do we need to be achieved? So consensus is a very broad concept. It's a part of the software of governance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You see, Honourable, why I'm saying that is because I am saying after each of us ran in the villages, FDC, NUP, UPC, DP, NRM, after we have ran in the villages and people voted, you are saying, or they are telling you they're looking for consensus. But I'm assuring you is another window of saying, you have defeated us from election. We want this. It's a penetration through another window. I've already said, this truth and reconciliation, call it, as a basis. For example, you could talk of a structure like a CA, Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly was a body built way outside the legislative process. Parliament was ongoing. Then you have that moment where it emanates even from legal notice number one. Legal notice number one set the ground that while we overthrow the legal regime, a holistic overthrow of the legal regime, we prepare an independent electoral making process. So you see, you have a basis, a fundamental basis to begin from. That is when you can have a system like a constituent assembly, a body completely standalone from the normal functioning of government. So if you're going to have this, then some of us are asking, what is the legal basis? What is the social basis? CA had the basis in that legal notice one, number one, overthrow a government and set that legal notice one, number one, and gave a way for an independent constituent assembly. We are saying South Africa had that discussion because South Africa had a fundamentally system that the whole world said, after this, we need to talk. Which one is this? Now, I will leave that.
So we need another legal notice, number 2.
Would
If you
work?
can,
Would that
if
work?
you can.
Legal notice number 2
if you
is
can.
what we should prepare.
But I
Just
have
give him
some other comments to make. And I think if I leave this, it would be unfair. One, in this discussion, much as I disagreed with the topic had imported Dr. Besigye, and which I feel I should comment. And earlier on said, the current status quo of the Kizza Besigye should be looked into by a way of respect for the Supreme Court. And I'm glad government respected it, in that all matters should be transferred to criminal division. When you transfer to criminal division, you are supposed to have the file, the physical file transferred, the exhibit. If somebody was alleged to have been arrested with a uniform, transfer the exhibit, tell even the court where the suspect or the accused is. If you have put him in Luzira or wherever, then you transfer the whole file. Now, after you have transferred, then Lukwago will go to that court because it would have been allocated according to jurisdiction. Then it picks up from there. And I've always said our call should be now how fast it does, because it shouldn't take a long time to transfer this document. Now, in today's appearance, if it was appearance on habeas corpus, I still insist the Supreme Court ruling should be quickly followed so that it speeds up, because justice delayed is justice denied. That is how we do it. Then it follows the normal judicial process. Apart from that, I like to say that while we talk of freedom or lack of it, I like to say that there are ingredients now, I would like to point to, that shows respect for the rule of law and therefore freedom. For example, I have talked of respect for Supreme Court. Even if some people were disagreed, and you can only disagree with the Supreme Court role. No, you can disagree with it, you can teach it at universities, you can dissect it, but must respect it. Okay? And it must be respected. And the government is doing that. 2, electoral results. We are going in for election in Kawempe. We have a very beautiful candidate. Beautiful not in physical appearance, in character. The daughter of Haji Kigongo. Well-educated, well-mannered, very polished lady, and is articulating issues. Now, we are going in with clean hands, and we expect to come out with clean hands, because should we lose that election, we say there be it. We hope to win, and we call on Kawempe people to support our candidate. But to show that there's freedom and there's respect for the rule of law, should we lose that Kawempe, even when we are very confident we have a good candidate and we are calling on people to support, we shall respect it. So these are ingredients of respect for the rule of law.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm actually have been reminded that we're running out of time, so I think I'll just ask you to just make your concluding remarks in a
Not
moment.
debate again.
You want another debate?
No.
No. I think I would have loved to go for another hour, but we don't have enough time.
I've not
so
known him
you
for
just
good
conclude.
conclusion. I've not
1
known
minute.
Professor for good conclusion.
In about a minute, Professor.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have been discussing a very depressing matter. Because whether Kizza Besigye was a Jamaican or a South Sudanese or any other person, let's assume he was not a Ugandan. You feel for him. And that's why there are demands all over the region. You saw in Kenya, there is a lot of demand from other parts of the country, Amnesty International, and so many other bodies that please, in that state, let that man go and be treated. Then when he's treated, he's fine. You go and you can put him on surveillance of whatever nature, and that man be treated, because life is more important than the crime that he purportedly made. So we just need to call for reason that in this time our country should have some reasonable people. Does it mean that all reasonable people have died in Uganda and now we have only people who are not reasonable? And if they are, including the judges, the police officers, because I saw in a picture today, as frail as he is, he was standing before the judge, but handcuffed with the Obed Mutale. This man who is almost dying. So really, we just need to be reasonable. You measure the capacity of people by how they respect human beings. In this case, we are now turning into machines.
Thank you, Dr. Ojambo. Joseph?
In my conclusion, I just want to say this, that it's urgent that if the NRA state has got no credible evidence against Besigye, they should release him urgently. And if they have any evidence against Besigye, and the NRA state has got any moral conscience amongst them, they should still actually do what Dr. Ojambo is saying. Besigye ought not to be subjected to the mess in which he is. After all, it's the NRA state under Mr. Museveni, who, as Comrade Awich says, you get subjected to selling your ideas to the people. In 1980, Museveni sold his ideas to the people and he lost badly. He was rejected. After being rejected, Mr. Museveni did not go to court in Barara, did not try court in Kampala, he didn't try one in Mubende, but he went to launch a criminal, illegal, atrocious war in Luweero, having stolen guns and others and went and attacked the barracks. Through that and 5 years of atrocious war with their friends, they came and captured state power in 1985 July. They fought amongst themselves for 6 months, broke down Kampala. They captured power on the 25th of January 1986, feared to have the same day. They held it back by 1 day, and they've been ruling us now for 36 years. There is nothing special about this guy's moral. So after that, they've got everything else they could have. On this occasion, Kizza Besigye is their comrade, but Kizza Besigye remains a Ugandan citizen and a human being. He does not deserve to be treated the way he is. And I'm talking about Kizza Besigye as the front face of the entirety of him and Haji, plus others who are being subject by this atrocious conduct by a regime which is effectively illegitimate, but for whom we give benefit of the doubt to continue ruling.
Thank you. Honourable Salaamu.
Well, I'm reminded of Ken Saro-Wiwa and his execution as he fought for the rights of the Ogoni people. That is not lost on me, but still, as I have, I'm preparing you. That's at the end of the day, the bottom line is that we will receive Dr. Kizza Besigye's body. The rest will follow.
Honourable Judge, your concluding remarks.
Well, the court has done its part, I think, and government has given a public statement that they are respecting the ruling of the Supreme Court. Like Comrade Awich said, what we should be calling for is to expedite the process so that justice, in capital letters, justice, is dispensed, because justice delayed is justice denied. So the call is really for all the institutions involved to make sure that the court ruling is respected and implemented as fast as possible.
Thank you. Major.
Oh, just two things. One is that, sure, there's freedom in Uganda, and we should protect it and uphold it. Two, on Kizza Besigye, there's nothing wrong with getting bail, as long as it is within the criminal justice procedures. Criminal justice procedures provides for that. Others provide in specific laws, and others by discretion of the judge. So if he's sick and he gets it, it's fine, as long as it is within the criminal justice procedures. And I still repeat that the Supreme Court ruling should be speedily followed, so that the justice procedures therein is followed quickly, and we see the end of this.
Thank you very much to each one of you for your insights into this topic. We've been asking, what is the price of justice in Uganda? The price of freedom, rather, in Uganda. And we've been looking at the case of Dr. Kizza Besigye and all political prisoners. This is the Citizens Chat Show. Thank you very much for being with us up to this end. Do drop us a comment, give us your feedback in the comment section of this YouTube channel at Civic Space TV. My name is Judith Atim. Thank you very much for being with us. Until next time, bye.